Optimism, said Cacambo. What is that? Alas, replied Candide, it is the obstinacy of maintaining that everything is best when it is worst. These words, spoken by characters in Voltaire's masterpiece Candide, might just be the most biting critique of philosophical optimism ever penned. And in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you why this seemingly simple satire became one of the most dangerous books in Europe, and why its message might be more relevant now than ever. You see, Voltaire wasn't just poking fun at naive positivity, he was launching a frontal assault on the entire intellectual establishment of his day, and in doing so, he changed how we think about human suffering forever. The year is 1755. On November 1st, All Saints' Day, the ground beneath Lisbon begins to shake. Within minutes, one of Europe's most prosperous cities collapses. Those who survived the earthquake rush to the harbor, only to be swallowed by a massive tsunami. Fires break out, burning for days. When it's over, at least 30,000 people are dead. Europe is stunned, but what truly infuriates Voltaire isn't the disaster itself, it's the response from philosophers and theologians. While bodies are still being pulled from the rubble, intellectual heavyweights like Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz are explaining why this horror is actually part of the best of all possible worlds. Let that sink in. Imagine telling parents who've just lost their children that their suffering is necessary for some greater cosmic good, that their agony is actually optimal in God's grand design, that everything happens for a reason. This wasn't just cold comfort, it was intellectual obscenity, and Voltaire couldn't let it stand. Leibniz's optimism wasn't some fringe belief. It was the dominant philosophical system of the day, endorsed by the church and embraced by the educated elite. His complex metaphysical argument went something like this. God, being perfect, would logically create the best possible world. Therefore, this world, despite appearances, must be the best possible. Evil exists, not because God is flawed or cruel, but because certain evils are necessary to achieve the greatest possible good overall. It's a masterful piece of circular reasoning, and Voltaire saw through it immediately. Rather than writing a dry philosophical rebuttal, he created something far more dangerous, a story so wickedly funny and accessible that even the barely literate could understand it. Candide was born. The tale follows our protagonist, young, naive Candide, who lives in the castle of Baron Thunder Ten Tronckh in Westphalia. There, his tutor Pangloss teaches him that we live in the best of all possible worlds, where everything happens for the best possible reason. Then all hell breaks loose. Candide is kicked out of the castle, press-ganged into military service, flogged nearly to death, and forced to witness a battle where thousands are slaughtered. He learns that his beloved Cunegonde has been raped and disemboweled by Bulgar soldiers. He survives a shipwreck only to arrive in Lisbon just in time for the earthquake. He's arrested by the Inquisition and nearly executed. And through it all, his mentor Pangloss, even after contracting syphilis being hanged, though incompetently, and dissected, continues to insist that all is for the best in this best of all possible worlds. The absurdity is the point. Voltaire isn't merely suggesting that optimism is wrong, he's showing that it's morally repugnant. By confronting abstract philosophy with concrete suffering, he exposes optimism as a form of intellectual violence against the victims of tragedy. What makes Candide so devastating is that Voltaire doesn't attack a straw man. He accurately represents Leibniz's arguments, then systematically dismantles them through relentless empirical evidence. The world simply doesn't behave as optimism predicts. The innocent suffer disproportionately. Virtue goes unrewarded. Justice fails. The universe appears, if not actively malevolent, then at least indifferent to human welfare. And yet, Voltaire isn't advocating nihilism either. That's where his genius truly lies. After establishing what philosophy isn't, he subtly suggests what it should be. When Candide and his companions finally settle on a small farm in Turkey, they meet a wise old man who tells them, "I have only 20 acres," said the Turk. "I cultivate them with my children, and work keeps us from three great evils: boredom, vice, and need." This seemingly simple statement contains Voltaire's alternative to optimism. Instead of grand metaphysical systems explaining away suffering, he proposes practical action in the face of an imperfect world. The novel's famous final line, "We must cultivate our garden," isn't a retreat from reality but an engagement with it on its own terms. Voltaire is proposing a radical philosophical shift from theory to practice, from contemplation to action, from explaining the world to improving it. His garden isn't just literal, it's a metaphor for the modest sphere of influence where each of us can make actual progress. This position anticipated pragmatism by more than a century. While intellectual history typically credits American philosophers like William James and John Dewey with developing pragmatism, Voltaire's garden already contained its essential insight. The value of a belief should be judged by its practical consequences, not its theoretical elegance. What makes this approach revolutionary is its humility. Unlike both optimism and pessimism, which claim to comprehend the totality of existence, Voltaire's philosophy acknowledges human limitations. We cannot know if this is the best possible world. We cannot penetrate the mind of God or grasp the ultimate purpose of suffering, but we can plant a garden, we can alleviate the suffering in front of us, we can create small pockets of order and beauty in a chaotic universe. This is neither passive resignation nor naive hope. It's a clear-eyed acceptance of reality coupled with a commitment to improve what lies within our power. The explosive impact of Candide cannot be overstated. Published anonymously in 1759, it was immediately banned by the Catholic Church, the French government, and the Council of Geneva. Voltaire denied authorship for years, knowing that admitting to writing it could mean imprisonment or worse. Copies were seized and burned, but demand was so high that underground editions proliferated throughout Europe. Why such panic over a thin novella? Because authorities recognized what many modern readers miss. Beneath its comic surface, Candide is a revolutionary document that undermines not just Leibnizian optimism, but the entire social order it supported. If this isn't the best of all possible worlds, then the existing hierarchy, with its kings, priests, and aristocrats, isn't divinely ordained. If suffering isn't necessary for some greater good, then the misery of the masses becomes not just unfortunate, but unjust. If practical action matters more than theoretical justification, then ordinary people might start demanding actual improvements rather than explanations. No wonder they tried to suppress it. The genius of Candide lies in its accessibility. While other Enlightenment philosophers wrote dense treatises for the educated elite, Voltaire created a page-turner filled with sex, violence, and humor. It's philosophy disguised as entertainment, a Trojan horse designed to smuggle dangerous ideas into the minds of ordinary readers. Its influence extends far beyond philosophy. Candide pioneered a narrative technique where comic exaggeration reveals deeper truths. Without Voltaire, we might not have had Swift's satires, Twain's social commentary, or even the absurdist humor of Monty Python. Its DNA is visible in everything from Catch-22 to South Park, works that use humor to dismantle comforting falsehoods. But perhaps most importantly, Candide offers an antidote to both blind optimism and crushing pessimism, a middle path that remains profoundly relevant today. We live in an age of competing absolutisms. Some embrace a naive positivity where every obstacle is just an opportunity in disguise, and every failure contains a hidden lesson. Others surrender to doomerism, convinced that collapse is inevitable and action futile. Both perspectives, like Pangloss's optimism, provide psychological comfort at the expense of reality. Voltaire would reject both extremes. He would tell us that the truth lies neither in insisting that this is the best possible world, nor in declaring it the worst, but in accepting its complexity and working to improve our corner of it. When faced with climate change, political polarization, or economic inequality, we can be neither Pangloss nor Martin the pessimist. We must instead be gardeners, clear-eyed about the challenges we face but committed to practical action within our sphere of influence. This is not mere pragmatism, it's a profound ethical stance that honors human dignity by acknowledging suffering while refusing to normalize it. It rejects the cruel comfort of believing that everything happens for a reason, offering instead the genuine solace of meaningful action in an imperfect world. Candide's journey from naivety through disillusionment to practical wisdom parallels humanity's own intellectual development. We begin with comforting myths, progress through painful disenchantment, and eventually, if we're fortunate, arrive at a mature perspective that balances hope with realism. Voltaire's ultimate achievement in Candide wasn't destroying optimism, it was something far more difficult and valuable, showing us how to live meaningfully without it. So the next time someone tells you that everything happens for a reason, or that we live in the best of all possible worlds, remember Candide's reply, "That may be well, but we must cultivate our garden." And then go plant